Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of iPullrank, and this week we've got a couple of SEO nostalgia bombs. We've got some really devious link schemes, that could potentially really mess up your rankings. And we've got a couple of awesome tech SEO strategies to bring right into 2022. Let's dive in. So first off, Google released a new robot tag that allows publishers to take iframed content and mark it as indexed if embedded. What's the use case? People are still figuring it out. Actually, there's a great article with some deep dives from Slade of CreativeRaceSEO. But the idea is if you have content, say a data visualization that lives on a URL that you don't want indexed, but you want to embed that content on another page that you're trying to rank for and you want that indexed, with this robot tag, Google's giving you the ability to choose what is indexed. It's going to be interesting to see how useful this is. Apparently, it's been asked for. Try out yourself. Something to keep an eye on. Cool little feature from Google. So thanks to that. Search Off the Record had a new episode. Way to go to Martin, John, and Gary for consistently churning these out to few weeks in a row. But basically on this episode, they started off making a joke about voice search, and they did want to talk about the future of search, like what they're looking at in 2022. A lot of the conversation revolved around sustainability when it comes to crawling and indexing. Google's got a massive problem there. It's just that there's so much content being generated every single day, and it is expensive, both in terms of memory, but also just like financially expensive to actually crawl and index, mostly crawling frequently, that content all across the web. So, Google is trying to identify different ways to do that in a more sustainable way without dropping too much content, or at least dropping the real crappy content. It's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting problem. Obviously, they have not solved it yet, and it could potentially create issues in terms of, them getting it wrong. But listen to the episode, see what you think, let them know how you feel. I appreciate their transparency with their podcast. It is an awesome podcast. Diving into the world of Twitter, Ryan Jones put together a really great thread all around mental health and SEO. He provided 3 tips just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. It can be overwhelming as we go through this pandemic. Some people are still not out of it. He's based in the UK. They're still, here and there lockdowns. His tips were, number 1, 3 tips. 1, talk to people. If you are, inside your own head, if you're working alone, if you're really feeling overwhelmed, talk to someone you trust. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be a friend. It could be a colleague. It could be your pet. No, but seriously, talk to someone. It's worth it. It can give you a little perspective. Number 2, exercise. If you have an opportunity to take care of yourself physically, even if it's just going out for a walk, that has a lot of benefits on your mental health, and just getting the body moving, the blood flowing, the endorphins going is all beneficial. And then number 3 is to take a break. Productivity is soaring and has been since we've all been working remotely. It's okay to, you have your head down, you're going hard. Take a step away, take a break. It's worth it. It'll make you feel better. You can come back refreshed. It's a great approach. And some of us just work too hard. So take a break. He provided a list of resources for people in the UK if you need any sort of mental health help, as well as US resources. So check that out on his Twitter thread. Thanks for putting that together, Ryan. Appreciate you being vulnerable. It's an important topic to talk about with a lot of people who kind of suffer silently, keep it to themselves. So George Nguyen on Twitter as well reached out from Search Engine Land. Maybe he's putting a post together, but he wanted to find out what are the best enterprise SEO tools that are out there. Got a range of great responses, whether it's SEMrush, Botify, Ahrefs, Screaming Frog, even BigQuery was mentioned. Great resource to kind of look through that thread and see what people are using for their enterprises in the world of SEO, because naturally enterprise SEO challenges are different than a small business or a single website with only like a few pages versus thousands and thousands of pages. So there was a bit of a SEO nostalgia bomb this week when Bill Hartzer got on Twitter. Now, he's been in the industry for like 20 plus years, knows from the early 10 Blue Link days, and he just put it out there. He said, what is something ancient that only an SEO veteran can remember. And the industry blew up. I mean, everyone who's been doing this for a while, all of SEO Twitter was kind of jumping in and sharing, some serious, some super funny, and some trolly answers. So for instance, Ray Hoffman said she remembers a Google SERP being purely 10 blue links. Andy Simpson remembered the high-ranking SEO forum by Jill Whalen. Taylor Berg remembers sites hiding shit in their footers, which they did. Christine Schlesinger remembers Matt Cutts, Matt Cut related, everything Matt Cutts. Bill Slawski remembered DMOZ and other BS ranking systems. Keith Good remembered paying Yahoo to boost rankings when that was a thing. Ian Lurie remembers white text on white background, whereas Holly Miller Anderson remembers the whole exact match domain was a thing. Some of these I remember, some of them were before even my time. What do you remember when it comes to SEO nostalgia? And finally, I have to call out, it cracked me up, but Lisa Barone, who has been in the industry for a while, basically said SEO veterans really like reminiscing about what they were doing 15 to 20 years ago versus talking about what they're doing today. So I think SEO veterans remember a lot. Lisa, you're right. And I get that. I mean, I remember if you ever go to a high school reunion or, any sort of old place that you worked, or even day camp as a kid, it's fun to be nostalgic and reminisce about the different times, earlier times, better times, worse times. I don't know. You tell me. In general SEO, okay, so there was this really cool article put together by Michael Cottam all about link building schemes or link schemes that could be doing some real damage to your site and you don't even know about it. There was some controversy, past few weeks all around whether or not you should disavow links to your site. Google's saying you don't really need to. We can tell between spam or not. And Michael's basically saying, well, look at your rankings, look at your link profiles, and if you got some issues, you might want to test out some of these BS link disavowing situations. So the ones that he called out were artificially inflated MozDA, which was really sketchy. Basically, the idea of people trying to sell links and boosting up DA on sites that don't actually have a high MozDA. Now remember, Moz domain authority is not actually a ranking factor, but a lot of people in the industry still rely on that metric as valuable because it's supposed to directionally give you the value authority of a website. In this link scheme, basically people were using, going to Google, searching for maps or images and finding a page with a bunch of links directly to Google. So it's 90 DA, which could then ultimately build up their DA on the Moz metric at, artificially. And then you're like, oh, look, I've got, a 70 plus DA website for your links. Let's build them out. That's sketchy as hell. Two negative SEO ones that Michael addressed. One was sneaky redirects. So basically almost not cloaking, but making your site look like it's totally legit, but then having it redirect to pages with a lot of scammy, type of content that's going to get you penalized by Google. And so what people would do is then link out to a bunch of competitors and try to do damage to them. And then because it looks like a normal domain, you wouldn't look at the link profile and think to myself, oh, I should disavow this. This isn't obviously porn or something. And then the third one was computer generated content. This is really shady, especially using AI and natural language generation for evil purposes, but basically in the middle of a normalish looking page, it's generating a ton of spammy, awful content, and then linking to that page, linking from that page to competitors, doing damage to your profile. I'm not going to say controversially one way or the other whether or not disavowing these types of links helps or hurts. I will say Michael's got great advice. Try it for yourself, see what happens. If it improves, and if it improves, and if not, then remove the disavow file. You can always undo that, right? Cyrus Shepard of Zippy, took all of this information, this interesting stuff around title tags, and he put together an epic report, basically analyzing 81,000 page titles and found that Google rewrote 61% of them. Now, this was sort of a similar finding to Dr. Pete Myers of Moz's study, but some insights that Cyrus found that I personally found really interesting were titles with over 70 characters get rewritten 99.9% of the time. So if you're going over that kind of recommended 60 character limit, chances are Google's going to rewrite your titles in some capacity. Removing brackets versus parentheses, he found that Google actually removes brackets in a title tag 33% and parentheses 20%, so less likely to remove parentheses. Found that removing dashes 20%, dashes versus pipes, there's always that debate. So dashes get removed around 20% and pipes get removed around 41%. And then his last takeaway in terms of matching, because Google is pulling the potential titles from H2s or visible content or other places on the page, he says to dramatically decrease the chance of Google rewriting your title, matching the H1 to the title tag seems to be an effective strategy. So, if you're doing experiments with title tags, those are some great insights. We'll talk a little bit about that more later when I get to Mike King's presentation at YoastCon. So Joshua Hardwick of Hrefs put together a nice blog post all around short form content versus long form content and SEO. A lot of insights in how to address that, looking at the SERPs, getting a sense of what search intent is. Ultimately, his recommendation is use the actual search results to inform the type of content that Google's looking for. There's no blanket, short term or short form or long form content works. It depends. It depends on the search results, search intent, and the other content that's out there. Morty Oberstein of SEMrush put together a really interesting thought piece article all around why Google's 10 blue links will have to go eventually. What Morty did is he's taking into consideration the future of MUM, which is the multi-unified modal algorithm that Google's going to be using to contextually use information from videos and images and text all together to bring together a better search experience that right now, Google is very still much focused on the actual query intent. So when you look at a query, it's just trying to satisfy that query as opposed to thinking about the user. Here's a great example, for instance, about looking at going to a Yankees game. And sometimes, you'll just get 2 bits of information about going to a Yankees game. Whereas with the MUM and the new search layouts, we're going to see Google trying to guide you with much more contextualized information, whether that's how, is it safe to go to the game? If I'm a fan of the opposing team, will, I be in trouble? What is the cost of a hot dog there? How much money should I save up? And so all these different pieces of information can come out as more rich snippets or featured snippets, and we will potentially see more guided pills or guided navigation to take you deeper into the contextual results that are more relevant for what you're looking for as an individual. I just think it's interesting. I think this is one thing that also speaks to the idea of building content for search intent. It's really just not this high level of I want a head term. It's what intent are you trying to address with your content? That's what's ultimately going to be surfaced based on queries. Lily Ray did IndexWatch 2021. She highlighted some of the winners in Google's US search results. A lot of it still comes down to EAT, so she continues to see authority sites like government and well-reputed medical sites ranking highly, as well as dictionary sites continue to do well. Stock photography sites continue to do well. One interesting one was Spotify is ranking a lot more for a variety of artist names, which they hadn't a couple years ago, and so they're continuing to spike. But it's always interesting to see Lily's reports using Systrix data about what types of sites are gaining more visibility and which ones are losing. Our own Andrew McDermott put together a really cool post all around using Google Trends for SEO. So he identified 5 ways that you can use this free data that Google provides via the Trends page to inform your SEO strategy. So for instance, whether it's newsjacking by identifying topical, topics that are appearing more and writing content relevant to that. Mapping seasonal trends, so really using Google Trends to identify what search traffic is happening depending on what type of year it is. Identifying fads, so like topics that are really just exploding. Brian Dean actually has his exploding topics site as well, but Google Trends is a great resource. Phrase-based indexing, so identifying related terms. This is not to be confused with LSI keywords, which are BS. Bill Slawski actually had a great article recently in SEO by the Sea, all distinguishing between the problems with LSI and how he prefers the term phrase-based indexing because it's not based on just like a couple of pages from the 70s. That's a whole other can of worms that I'm not going into today. And then the fifth recommendation is location-based targeting. So with Google Trends, you can actually identify, what is trending based on certain geographies. Like if I can look in the States and the US about whether a certain topic is popular, especially if you're in local SEO, that's a great way to think about how you might want to build content with using geography. Barry Schwartz interviewed Riley Hope recently on his series, Interviewing SEOs. This was all about COVID and search behavior. Riley also works with a lot of local SEO small businesses. So she gave a lot of insights in terms of how we're adapting, how people adapted when COVID first started in terms of their marketing and SEO, and how they should be utilizing a lot of the tools that Google provides now more effectively, that Google really tries. A lot of small businesses are not familiar with Google Business Profiles and the variety of free tools that they provide for small business owners. So it's a great conversation between her and Barry. Definitely check that. David McSweeny did a little study for SEObility all around what is the best CMS. They looked at 5 CMSs, including WordPress, Joomla, Wix, Squarespace, and GoDaddy. So a small sampling size, but he did find that WordPress was the best for SEO, gave you the most tools that allow you to, impact your SEO, whether it's like the ability to work with robot text or titles or meta descriptions. WordPress was the best. And then he found that Wix was the best kind of page building type of CMS tool. So check out that article from David. In technical SEO, so Johana Maier did this really technical, interesting article for OnCrawl all about custom search for SEO and how you can actually use Google's programmable search engine and its custom search JSON API in order to identify search intent. So she goes through the step-by-step of how to access it. It's a free API, shows you how to use it, but she gave 3 interesting use cases of how you could pull this. Now, it's not going to give you one-to-one search results. Like the search results that it provides compared to actual search results are negligible, but she found it to be helpful enough that it's worth using. So for instance, she was saying like for e-commerce, if you're looking for like a head term for some sort of search query, you can identify like how gendered the term is. So if you're looking for, sneakers, are you seeing a lot of results that are like sneakers pipe men, sneakers pipe male, sneakers pipe boy, and start to segment that way in terms of what's appearing on those search results. Same for page type. So, you can basically look at whether certain page types are appearing for SERPs. Another one for e-commerce. So like, if product pages are appearing for a certain SERP, and that's the intent that Google thinks, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to build out this product page for this query because I'm more likely to rank because that's what Google is looking for. And the third one was all around competitor domains. So really using this to identify, a regex system or regex formula that would identify where your competitors are showing up in a variety of different search results. It's cool, it's actionable, it's technical. Appreciate Johana putting that together. So check out that article. And then Crystal Carter yesterday put out an article on Moz all about the top tech SEO strategies for 2022. So first, I love what Crystal did here. I will say that I don't think that this is always easy to do, but these are the best strategies to do. For instance, speaking of mom, she's with Morty and bullish on it that Google is going to use more and more visual content. So she recommends working with producing multimedia content as part of your tech SEO. She thinks Google is going to continue to be into security. I mean, they just did this whole thing in the advertising space all around replacing the FLOC with Topics API. Now, that's not SEO, so that's why I didn't really address it, but Google wants to continue to make sure that the web is safer and private. And so Crystal thinks that in combination with speed, if you focus on privacy and security, then Google will ultimately potentially reward your site with better rankings, almost similar to what they did a few years ago with the move from HTTP as the protocol to HTTPS as a more secure version. That potentially would be generalized across your entire website. The SEO specialism for Google channel diversity. So this is kind of a speaking to verticalization. If you're in the travel industry, if you're in e-commerce, if you're in the automotive industry, Google provides different types of rich snippets and segment like verticalization features that you should be taking advantage of. Hospitality and travel has had this for a while when it comes to both like reviews as well, that's more in depth, as well as actual like kind of like a travel box. She believes that's going to happen for more industries. You're seeing it right now with e-commerce. Google is very much involved with developing e-commerce, and as an SEO, depending on what your business is, it's your responsibility to take advantage of that verticalized opportunity from a tech SEO standpoint, making sure you have the right structured data on your site for your products and all that to make sure that you're served up properly in the results. And then finally, borderless international SEO, just talking about the idea of how it's so much easier to buy things that aren't just in your city, state, country. And as a result, there's going to become, as long as you are doing the tech SEO things right, that you will appear, cross-country or using a country code top-level domain, taking advantage of those international opportunities. I personally think that people will always want to try to support local. I think that's good for the ecosystem, but if you are an international enterprise business, you want to pay attention to that and continue to try to take advantage, whether it's language-based or any of these technical SEO, hreflang, it's technical SEO opportunities that you'll have for international e-commerce. YoastCon happened last week, and there were a couple of really great, a whole bunch of great presentations. Two that I wanted to call out was Aleyda Solis did hers on the worst SEO issues of online stores in 2022, how to fix them. I love how actionable a lot of her strategies are. Now, if you're working with a e-commerce site with a ton of products, this stuff isn't necessarily easy, but it's very important, because as you get like more and more products, like thousands of products, that ends up creating a ton of product pages, a ton of navigation, subcategories. There are a lot of best practices that you can utilize to take advantage of this by making sure that it's set up correctly. So she addressed cannibalization, so setting up your tech SEO in a way that you're not cannibalizing your products or your subcategory pages, optimizing for that. No indexing or not linking to subcategories or facets with traffic potential. So basically hiding some of these subcategories or the faceted pages in a way that's not benefiting your site. That's potentially an easy-ish win if you index them properly. No content on subcategory pages. This gets talked a lot in e-commerce, but like making sure that you actually have valuable content on these category pages can help, and the subcategory pages. Product pages with good content, so continually improving your product page content and not just using completely generic, crappy text on there. Take the time putting together, good templates that you can use that improves the rankings. Also, product pages with inconsistent statuses. So there's been a big, uptick in not having certain products in stock due to supply chain issues. Making sure that your website keeps up with those in-stock products, as well as seasonal pages with inconsistent statuses. So if you're like removing pages and 404ing them when they're not in stock, that could potentially hurt your traffic as well. So she has some tips there. And then finally, informational top of the funnel content. So a lot of e-commerce pages think, because it's not a direct, commercial type of query or transactional query, that's not worth creating content for. If you invest in top of the funnel content and build a good reputation and social proof, your people who find you are and discover you are more likely to increase your sales and traffic to those money pages. So, maybe you want to consider creating content for the top of the funnel, even if you're in e-commerce. Meanwhile, Mike King of iPullrank did his own presentation at YoastCon, and his was all about every best practice you learn for e-commerce SEO is wrong, which I love because it's like, you do have all these best practice recommendations, but as SEOs, we know that you have to actually try them out yourself. As Mike says throughout this presentation, the best practice is practice. What might work for someone might not necessarily work for you. So he goes through some anecdotal examples of as your site gets bigger, when you look at the actual data, what's recommended as a best practice isn't always the case. So first off, he was like keeping title tags short. We're always, even earlier through Cyrus's Shepard study, it said, keep it under 60 characters. Well, Mike actually found that in this one example that backloaded titles actually drove results. So try that out for yourself. Duplicate content is bad, we're always told. Wrong. He found an example of 80% of traffic driven from duplicate content. Another one, template content is bad. Wrong. He found that how adding some template content at the bottom of a page can actually increase lift by 167%. And then this idea going back to meta descriptions, that we're better at writing meta descriptions than Google, maybe not. His recommendation of testing, which is pretty controversial, would be to leave the meta description blank and see what Google puts in there, and maybe it actually improves the click-through rate of your rankings, because we know meta descriptions aren't really actually a ranking factor. So why not try and see if Google can produce better click-through rates through your meta descriptions? So first off, there was actually a couple of really cool tools that were shared this week. Ryan Jones, not the mental health SEO Ryan Jones, but Ryan Jones from Razorfish, put together a little side project all around keyword research using Ngrams. So what his free tool did is you put in a search query and it'll use, related searches from Google and Bing to map out a whole bunch of related Ngrams. And so Ngrams are the series of connected words in a phrase. They're not actually keywords, but they can potentially generate ideas for keywords. So in this example, I put in cheap flights from Chicago, and you look at the results and it generates all of these related searches very easily and effectively for free from Google and Bing that you can then download and use for your own content generation purposes. So cool work on that, Ryan. Y'all check that out. Meanwhile, Roussel put together, so this is actually a paid Data Studio template tool, but it's for organic search, understanding keywords, performance templates. Helps identify actually cannibalization issues and a couple of other how your organic search is performing. It's only £10 for those of you in the UK. I don't know what the exchange rate right now is for US, but Alice has that available and it's really nicely designed. I appreciate you putting that together and sharing that, Alice. And then Shelley Walsh, really simple use case of formulas for SEO using Google Sheets. So a lot of kind of straight standard forward ones, but if you've never really used it, the length or VLOOKUP, Shelley has a really great kind of walkthrough and use cases on how you can potentially use those. And finally, in the world of Rankable, the podcast, yesterday I spoke to Ruth, Burr, Reedy, all about, so Ruth has been working remotely, as I have, since 2016. She's managed a variety of teams and has really gotten her processes and her client relationship management down pat in a remote world. We discussed all about, what she does and what's been effective for her. Next week, I have Amanda Milligan joining me from Stacker. She's the head of marketing. We're going to talk all about creating newsworthy content, which is huge for, whether you're trying to go viral or if you're just in media publisher and you constantly want to do topical content that gets picked up and shows up in search. So I'm looking forward to talking to Amanda. And then finally, for those of you who did miss it, we teamed up with Advanced Web Rankings. Bogdan Muntian teamed up with Mike and talked all about, year 2, how the pandemic continues to impact search demand recovery. We dove into, the travel industry, the personal finance industry, e-commerce, a lot of really interesting insights there. You can check out the replay. It's on our site. Check the link in the description. That's it. There's a lot. There was a lot that was going on. A lot of great content from our industry. A lot of really smart people. Appreciate everybody putting it out there. Appreciate you for watching the SEO Weekly. I hope you found it informative, educational, maybe even funny at moments. If you enjoy this, please subscribe, leave a comment, share with the world. Helps me out with the algorithm and showing up and, my own YouTube SEO search results, which always working on. Anyway, have a great rest of your weekend. We'll be back next week. And be good. Take a mental health break right now. Go outside. Go for a run. Talk to somebody. Anyway, appreciate you. Catch you later.